Hi, Jen. Hello?
Hello?
Oh, there we go.
New Year.
Happy New Year, happy holidays. And all that goodness.
Hmm. Cheese
Yeah, I ate way
and
too
all that
much
cheese.
cheese over the holidays.
Me too. I love cheese.
It's okay, it's the holidays. Let's buy 10 different kinds of cheeses and just eat them all the time and get fat and
Yeah,
wash it
for
down with
no
sugar.
apparent, just no reason. Just do it. I had
Yeah,
lots of brie.
and brie, yeah. Brie is the weird cheese. It's not even really
Oh,
that
I
delicious.
like it.
You liked it, yeah?
Hmm.
It's like an odd deliciousness. Oh, Dawn. Dawn is here. There's Dawn. Hello, Dawn.
And then I had some
Greeting.
Havarti. Greetings and salutations.
You had some Havarti?
Yeah.
I love Havarti. Great
We're uh
cheese.
Um,
It's a
we're we're
sandwich cheese.
we're live streaming and people are anyone who's listening right now. We're discussing cheese.
Cheese talk.
Yeah, it's the cheese.
It's gonna be different than
All the cheese.
our actual discussion, which will be about vegetation studies, which is the opposite of cheese.
Well, we could talk about salads and veggies.
Is there is there a vegetal cheese?
There is,
That's a
Tony,
great question.
See,
and it's really
we
gross
should be saving this for the radio show.
because
This
a hundred
energy?
thousand years ago, I used to be a vegan, and I
Did you?
tried that
Did you really?
plant-based
Or
cheese.
were you?
Yes, I was a vegetarian for 18 years,
Why does that sound like totally plausible?
probably because
Yeah.
you know me a little bit.
Like, down with the
Yeah, I
patriarchy.
could see you being a vegetarian.
Down with the
Okay.
patriarchy. I eat vegetables.
No, it was,
You're
I'm not
getting,
fond of
you're
the
getting in trouble.
um, texture of
Of food, yeah.
meats and
No,
poultries.
yeah. My daughter's the same way. She like only eats like what is she? Only chicken.
Yeah, couldn't do that either. Like I eat it now because I ended up getting very sick
Eat it now because it's
because,
delicious. It's chicken.
well,
I
you
eat
know,
only chicken and only in bucket form.
Oh, jeez,
right.
it's delicious.
My dad used to tell me, Jen, you're an Anishinaabe, you need to eat meat.
Oh, it's true.
Yeah, and then I ended up getting sick, and guess why? Because my blood type and being an Anishinaabe, my body requires meat.
Yeah.
Oh, really? Yeah,
Oh,
makes
it's
Hmm.
true.
sense.
We need that.
So,
We need that. The bloodier, the better.
yeah, and the supplements just weren't doing it
No,
because
they
I was
don't.
on all the B supplements and the amino acids, and so none of those things were helping. I needed to eat the real stuff. So I had moose meat and
There
deer
you go.
meat, beef.
So bear with me, guys. I gotta run everything today.
Oh, you're
The
solo.
manager's is still in Wawa, so I
Oh, is
will.
he?
Hmm.
Yeah, I mean, I created the system, so I should be able to run it. But
He made it there in his vehicle?
yeah, he's getting it. He's getting it repaired right now.
Oh,
Oh, okay, good.
and I made soap over the holidays.
he made. I saw that. I saw that you were making soap.
Cedar,
Yeah.
cedar soap.
I thought it was. You're making something I could eat,
No, it
but it
looks good.
was.
It
Turns
looks
out it was
like it.
soap. Your soap looked delicious, by the way.
You only eat soap if you say something inappropriate.
Yeah, it looked. I was scrolling, and then it's like all food, and I'm like, oh wow, whatever Jen's making, that looks delicious. And it was I read further, and I was like, oh man, let's
And
not blame
soap.
everything as food. The fat kids like looking at everything. Oh, delicious.
Well, there's lots of fat in my soap. Well,
Well,
here's what
yeah.
it looks like. Can you
Yeah,
see?
exactly.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, yeah.
You can eat it if you want to.
I haven't eaten
Yeah, so
soap
that's from
since
scratch.
I haven't eaten soap since I was young. So
Oh yeah? What did you have? Like Sunlight?
no, the old white bars,
Ivory?
or the green bars.
Ivory?
Dove?
Irish Spring?
Irish Spring.
No.
Yeah,
Before
when
that, do you
you're
remember the old clinical green bars, like you'd see
Oh yeah.
in
What was it? What
movies?
was the brand
Yeah,
name?
got
Coast.
got them put. Yeah, they got them put in your mouth. It was the most horrible thing ever.
Was it not
Was it
Coast?
Coast or was no? I think it
Here
was
I'm
another one.
sharing my pain from public school
It
back
wasn't
when.
Coast. It was another name.
I know, I can see
I
it.
don't know, but it was the
I can
horrible,
too.
horrible soap.
Well, we grew up with Camay in the house.
Kame.
And
How
Sunlight
Camay,
pretentious.
yeah,
dish soap.
Camay, yeah.
I would like some Kame, please.
Was it Sunlight Green Bar Soap Cakes?
I don't use Irish
No, that
Spring.
would
I
be
use
Palmolive.
Kame.
That was the old commercial, wasn't it? Ah,
Yeah,
use
I
come
hear
on.
you, Don.
I do not wish to have the Irish Spring. I enjoy Kame. It is my favorite soap.
And Grey Poupon.
And Grey Poupon is my favorite mustard.
So I'm drinking my morning smoothie. The
I
subject.
didn't even eat.
Smooth. Your morning smoothly?
My, yeah.
I
Welcome
think we're ready
back.
to do a radio show, damn it, right
I think
now.
so. We didn't do. I wasn't here for the last two of them. Everyone had the pleasure
Oh,
of you guys and Chris McKay.
This is true, yeah.
yeah, that one. That was a good one. That was a good one, Jen. You missed a
I
good
am
one.
sorry. I'm sorry I missed it. We're gonna have to invite him on when I'm here too. What are
Yeah.
you playing there? Oh, the Great Poupon.
Pardon me, do you have any Grey Poupon?
Oh my God. So my grandkids were here in the fall time. I had them for a weekend.
Oh,
And
Yeah.
good.
I made them watch Wayne's World.
Oh, of course.
Oh, did you? Nice.
Yeah, I did.
That's a
Because
great
I
movie.
wanted to watch a horror movie, and a couple of the other ones did. And I told one of them, if you're scared, let me know and we'll change it right away. And so he let me know that he was scared. So we changed it. And I'm trying to think of like, okay, well, what do we want to watch that nobody's watched? Even though I've watched Wayne's World a bunch of times.
Oh, for sure.
So we played it. Then after that, I sent them to their dads, and all that was coming out of their mouth were one-liners from Wayne's World. I was very proud of myself.
Oh, really?
That's
That's
amazing.
great.
That's
I love
amazing.
it. Culturally important movie.
It is. Yeah,
That's right.
Wayne's World's great.
And they've
I'm
watched
still.
they've watched it again since.
Oh, did they really? Wow,
Hmm.
that's good.
Don't show them Wayne's World 2, though. That's terrible.
Yeah, it was awful.
Oh, that's not even on my radar, man.
No,
That's just
don't,
not
don't
even
ruin
there.
it for them. Just let them think that's the only one ever made.
That's right. It is the only one ever made.
Yes. I'm still
And then
looking up
speaking
that
of
green soap.
Yeah, and speaking of Wayne's World, Mike Myers, I'm thinking about, and remember all the Austin Powers movies?
Oh God,
I
yeah, he
never
was
wanted to
great.
watch those because I thought they were stupid. So one day I played hooky from work, 100,000 years ago. My kids were in public school, and I decided to watch all the Austin Powers movies all by myself, and I laughed a lot.
Oh, those were great. Those were really good, especially the first. How many did they do? 3?
3, I think, yeah. I
Yeah,
don't
the
even
first
remember what
2
they're
were
all
good.
called.
I mean, the first one was
Hmm.
brilliant, right? All those different characters he played.
Hmm.
I love
Yeah,
that.
they
Oh
were
God.
good.
Okay, we're about a minute 46 out.
I
Everything's
see.
open. I'm ready to rock.
You got the PowerPoint and everything?
I do, yes, I do. It's
Excellent.
on the vegetation studies.
Correct. Correct.
Oh, speaking of those things, I better turn off my emails.
Oh, yeah, we're muting
Yeah.
my phone here. Oh, you guys, I guess I
Oh,
don't have to
that
mute my
too.
phone.
Thank you.
I have to
Do
mute
do
my phone
because
because I'll mute my mic.
one of these days I'll answer the phone while we're on the radio when my mom calls.
Oh yeah, do it.
That's good.
Hi Ma, you're on Wawate Radio. She will excuse herself very fast, I think.
Yeah, that would be the next session because this one isn't on Wallate. The next one is though.
Yep. And then my daughter would excuse herself very quickly, but then my son, though, he would have lots to say.
Okay, 30 seconds. I'm gonna go mute, guys. So
Okay.
you know the drill. I'll see you live.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Don Parkinson, and I'm a senior consultation specialist with Atkins Realis. Today, we are continuing our series of live stream topics on the Northern Road Link project as it moves through the provincial environmental assessment and federal impact assessment processes. The topics we are covering parallel our project activities. We hope these will help our viewers and listeners better understand the project and provide input along the way. And with me today is my usual co-host back from extended absence, I
Hiatus?
think, hiatus, Jennifer Ashwazagay Pereira from Henvey Inlet First Nation. Jen, welcome back. It's been a while. You missed us, I bet, eh?
I sure did. I had FOMO pretty bad. Fear of missing out.
Well, you did miss out. Yeah, you did, because
I know.
we had some good times, very good times. Kept the ship going in the right direction, I think. So
I
we're
don't
back
know
at it
about
again
that,
here,
though.
and
It was
well,
left in
as
the
much
hands
as
of all
we
of you
can.
fellows.
Piloting it into the biggest rock possible.
Or
In spite
sandbar.
of all the water everywhere else. Yeah, sandbar. Yeah. Yeah, we crashed a few times, I must admit. So, anyway, we're back. It's 2025. Happy New Year to
Hmm.
everyone. If it's not too late, I know it's January 7th. I don't know when the deadline is
I
for,
say the 15th.
is it, 15th? Okay, yeah. People have different rules about these things, and I'll go with the 15th on that one too. And today's topic is the vegetation studies for the Northern Road Link project. And
Hmm.
great topic, important topic, lots to discuss as part of it. Vegetation obviously plays a major role in an environmental assessment or an impact assessment, as you know, Jen. And so we're going to talk about that and talk about the studies that we do and why we do them and how we do them. And but before we do that, we are going to do a little bit of as we always do, a little bit of a background on the project. And so maybe I'll throw it over to you, Jen, to run through a little bit of a background on the Northern Road Link project.
All right, I think I can do that. So the Northern Road Link is a proposed all-season road in Treaty 9 territory in Northern Ontario, and it will connect the Ring of Fire minerals deposits to the all-season highway network via the proposed Martin Falls Community Access Road, and will also provide a chance for Webbequay First Nation to connect to the all-season highway network. So the Ring of Fire, as we know and understand, is considered one of the most promising mineral development opportunities in Ontario, with minerals including chromite, cobalt, nickel, copper, and platinum. And the road, proposed road, is subject to the Provincial Environmental Assessment Act as well as the Federal Impact Assessment Act. So it's pretty robust. And the other cool thing about this project is the proponents are First Nations, and they're Martin Falls First Nation and Webbequay First Nation, which are remote First Nations that are located about 500 kilometers north of Thunder Bay. And both obviously are not currently accessible by all-season roads, which is why they're looking at all-season roads in the territory. So there have been numerous historical studies on the all-season road to the Ring of Fire. Oh, 5 years ago now, we can say, because it's 2025, and in 2020, Ontario, Martin Falls, and Webbequay announced an agreement to work together where the First Nations agreed to conduct an environmental assessment for the project, which is funded by the province, rather.
It's funded by the
And then
project, which is the project's funded
by
by
the
the province.
province, yeah.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about how this project interacts with other projects. As most of you may know, there are two other all-season community or all-season road projects going on at the environmental assessment or impact assessment stage right now, and these actually um, would connect with the Northern Road Link Road at the north end and south end. And each of these projects were initiated at different times for different reasons. Um, as I said, they're all going through individual provincial environmental assessments and federal impact assessments. And the Northern Road Link will actually connect the Webbequay Supply Road, which is a proposed all-season road running from the airport in Webbequay southeast to east of the Mukatai River, where it would join in the McFalls Lake area, where it would join the northern end of the Northern Road Link Road, which would then extend down to meet with the Martin Falls Community Access Road just west of Martin Falls. And then that Martin Falls Community Access Road extends south, where it would connect then with two resource roads that would be upgraded. And these ultimately would then connect to the provincial highway network. So all of these together would connect these two remote First Nations with the provincial highway network and the Ring of Fire to the provincial highway network. And Jen, maybe you want to talk a little bit now about the project components.
Sure. So this will be an all-season multi-use gravel road, and the length could be up to 164 kilometers, and then I think the shortest route would be about 117 once all of the selections are chosen. And the right of way will be about 100 meters, but there will be 60 cleared meters across going down. And then the proposed road will go across a number of waterways, so that'll include culverts and bridges. And I think the largest crossing will be over the Attawapiskat River, where it'll be 200 meters wide. And so the temporary and permanent infrastructure, or ancillary infrastructure, it's called, there could be storage and laydown areas, maintenance and facilities and yards. So we'll see a couple of buildings go up in these cleared areas, and then some access roads to get to places like aggregate sites where they're going to get the rock, and then as well as the access roads to the facilities, the storage and laydown areas, and then construction camps along the way. I think we're looking at 3 or 4, Don?
We don't know yet for Northern Road Link. There's 4 for the Webbequay Supply Road, but we don't know yet for the Northern Road Link yet.
Okay.
And now let's talk a little bit about the vegetation studies, which is today's topic. The purpose of these studies, again, is to establish that baseline, right? To identify what is there, the existing conditions, what plant communities are there, um, and because if you don't know what's there, you can't identify what potential or predict what potential impacts there might be from the project. So we need to understand the current situation, those baseline conditions, what we call those baseline conditions, and we have to set boundaries in terms of the what we call spatial boundaries, which means um, the the area, the territory that we're studying. For in terms of looking at the impact of the project. So we have two things. We have a local study area and a regional study area, and then we have a time frame for but time boundaries as well too, temporal boundaries we call them. So we have a construction phase, which could be anywhere from 3 to 10 years. Um, which would be involve the actual construction of the road. And then there's the operations phase, which is sort of arbitrarily identified as being 75 years. Typical lifespan of a road, obviously it can last longer than that, but typically that's the number that's used. So we look at when we do our assessment, we look at the different phases in terms of the time frame. We look at the space that might be impacted, like a local study area and a regional study area. The local study area is defined as 1 kilometer from the boundary of the preferred corridor. The regional study area is 5 kilometers from the local study area boundary. So the actual corridor is 2 kilometers wide, which would be 1 kilometer on either side of the road. So that gives you an idea of the assessment boundaries, like the physical boundaries that we look at in terms of looking at impacts. Then we move on, and we're going to talk a little bit about our favorite topic, valued components, which is a fancy way of basically saying the things that are studied as part of an environmental assessment or an impact assessment because they're identified as important or sensitive to change. People are concerned about them. They're valuable for cultural or traditional reasons, and they're likely going to interact in some way to some extent with the project activity. So that's what so valued components in our case are plants and vegetation communities. That's what we're talking about. That's what we're studying, these valued components. Then we have these things called indicators, and indicators are always there's indicators that are associated with each valued component. Sometimes there's many, sometimes there's just a couple. In our case, when we look at plant and vegetation communities, indicators are vegetation type abundance, so that would be quantity, so numbers, and then quality, the different species, and the roles of those different plants as well. So that's how you sort of define quality. And then you have vegetation biodiversity, and I'll get into that a little bit more detail on the next slide. So first of all, we talk about abundance. When we're talking about abundance, we're talking about the quantity of each community type, and
Mm-hmm.
then the quality of the vegetation community type, right? Because when we talk about quality, plants may serve a specific, may have a certain amount of significance, more significance than other plants, because they provide food for key species, right, Jen? Like lichen, for example, moose, and caribou, I believe,
Caribou.
feed on
Mm-hmm.
caribou feed on lichen, and so that lichen then have a special significance, right? So that's what we're getting at when we talk about quality of
Oh,
vegetation
that's right.
communities.
And the
And then
same
when we
with
talk about how, was that Jen?
I was going to add same with some of the medicinal plants and other things that Anishinaabe
Yes.
harvest in the area. So we want to make sure that that is good quality as well, because we certainly don't want to use something and put in our bodies that's not good quality.
And we only know that's good quality if community members tell us, right? And that's where the importance, and I'll get to this a little bit later on,
Hmm.
of Indigenous knowledge, right? Of community members sharing that information about what plants they use for their own purposes, whether it's medicinal or whatever, right?
Yeah, and
We need to know
we
that.
won't be we do need to know that, but I like to always add that we're not going to
Yeah.
put that out there in the studies when they're published, because we want to make sure that we keep that kind of information confidential.
Yeah, but we do need to know it in order to be able to route the road properly, right? To limit the amount
Hmm.
of impact on areas where those plant communities exist, right? So you're right, it's a balance. But there's no reason why we can't keep it confidential. We just need to know it for planning purposes so we don't impact those areas significantly.
That's right.
So, and then the way we measure impacts is we look at impacts on, so once we map out the plant communities, which is another process I'll get to in a couple of minutes, we look at, okay, here's the footprint of the road, right? Here's the road and the area needed for the road. So you take that away. So you look underneath it and compare it to the way things are now, and you say, okay, we're going to lose this much area of different plant communities from building the road. And in the case of the road, it's really not much because it's a very narrow band. It's not a wide area. But that's how we measure, that's one of the ways we measure impacts. Then we look at things like vegetation biodiversity. And you may be asking, well, what the heck is that? Well, it's two things. It's a combination of two things. It's species richness, which is strictly number of species in an area, and it's a combination of that and diversity, which is number of species and the abundance of those species within the local and the regional study areas. And so, how do we measure impacts in that case? So, the project may have effects on which could be direct effects on the species presence, meaning, in some cases where the road is built, that species, if they were within the footprint of that road, then they may not be there because the road is being built over it. Or there could be indirect changes as a result of changes to habitat availability, right? Habitat may have been changed, whether the quality or the quantity of habitat, or degraded in some ways. So there's direct and indirect impacts or changes. And then let's get to talk a bit now about the desktop and field methods that are used. So there's quite a process involved in this, and some of it's done like I'm suggesting here from the desktop, right, where you have experts who are typically biologists, and they sit down usually with GIS software, so mapping software, and they're looking at aerial imagery, whether it's satellite imagery or high resolution satellite imagery or aerial imagery taken from an aircraft, and they look and they start drawing lines to try to um, trace out areas of different vegetation communities based on their experience and the looking at the images. They trace out these areas and come up with sort of an initial sort of habitat classification, and they do this for the local study area and the regional study area. And then they conduct what's called a vegetation surveys, and there are provincial standards in Ontario for conducting these surveys. It's called ecological land classification. So there's specific ways of doing this work, and it's a uniform way that has to be applied. So that way the results are comparable, and so that you can build a database of land classification for the province. And so what happens is this process is followed in the field work to be able to better sort of define these areas, these vegetation communities on maps. So within each vegetation unit that you're sampling, So you put in what's called a plot, which is an area like of a defined size, and then within that plot you do your deeper studies and you look at like what's the percent cover of and dominant and co-dominant species within the canopy, meaning like the taller trees, the sub canopy
Hmm.
below there, and then the understory, which are the plants at the bottom, right? So you've got the tallest trees, you've got sort of the medium trees that sit in the middle, then you've got what you call the understory. So they do a very sort of structured survey for a specified plot or size of or shape and size of land in different areas. The idea is to be able to get a sense for what, you can't survey everything because the area is so big, but you want to get an idea of what
Hmm.
it's like and predict in the areas in between, right? So soil information is collected, samples of plants are collected for identification if they're not immediately identified, and all that information is recorded. And it's really important, right? Because Jen, where I talk about these baseline studies, you got to know what's there,
Hmm.
right, before you can predict potential effects. So
Right.
you don't know the effects until you know what you're dealing with, right? So that's why these studies have to be done, and they take time, right?
Absolutely. So there's no surprises later.
That's right. There's no surprises later. So then what happens is a little bit more complicated. You get into things like modeling, habitat modeling, where you take all that data from the field surveys, you look at these maps that where you traced out these vegetation areas before, and you try to identify, basically paint a picture of what plants are where, like what plant communities are where in that local study area, in that regional study area, and that again, doing that gives you a better idea of it makes it easier for you to predict what potential effects might be, which is ultimately what we're trying to do as part of an environmental assessment or an impact assessment. So there's a lot to it. It gets kind of complicated, but it's not quite as straightforward as I'm explaining it. Um, so, like in terms of I wish it were, but that's why
Yeah,
you
it's a
have
lot.
specialists doing this work. Yeah, it's a lot, and
Hmm.
and then in terms of the assessment of effects, it's a really stepwise sort of process. Um, you look at the interactions between the project and the valued components, and then you try to identify potential effects. You, again, as part of this process, identify mitigation measures, right? And with that famous word mitigation, which is basically a fancy word to uh, to mean reduce or eliminate impacts or effects. So you look at ways of minimizing the effects once you've identified the effects. Um, you Once you've identified how much you can mitigate, then you know what residual effects are, what effects are left over after mitigation. And again, these all contribute to what we call the cumulative effects assessment, which is where we look at not just this project, but other projects in the area from the past, from the present, and then reasonably realistic ones that might be happening in the future. They call them reasonably foreseeable. And then as part of what's that, Jen?
Nothing. I just find that a funny term. Reasonably foreseeable.
Foreseeable, yeah, meaning it's possible, like given the fact that they've applied for permits, um, or they're a part of an environmental assessment or an impact assessment, or show some intention of going forward with it, it's considered reasonably foreseeable. That's the terminology that's used. And then part of this assessment of effects work involves identifying, and this is really important, I think, for everyone to know that commitments, right? Follow up commitments. So it's one thing to say,
Hmm.
here's potential effects, here's how they could be mitigated or reduced. Um, these are the effects left over, but it's these follow up commitments, right? Um, that need to be followed through on, and monitoring to make sure that the effects that you're predicting are in fact happening, or hopefully not happening. Um, but nothing strange is going on that wasn't expected, because if that's the case, then there's a need to go and look and come up with other solutions to try to limit impacts. So there's there's a lot to this, and last but not least, we're going to talk about the importance of IK, Indigenous knowledge. We talked a little bit about this before. We spent a lot of time talking to communities, trying to understand, um, collect information on plants, on vegetation communities, understand what plants are important to community members, um, and are highly valued, so that we can try to avoid and know where these are approximately, so we can try to
Hmm.
avoid these areas again. And in doing this, we maintain confidentiality, so that we're not telling others exactly where these different plants are located, so that
That's it.
community members can continue to enjoy them and use these plants for their different purposes, for their traditional purposes. Um, and again, this information is really key, because it helps us figure out where to put the road to limit impacts to the greatest extent possible. So lots of uh, lots of work involved in this, in the vegetation studies, from the beginning to the end. It spans the whole length of an environmental assessment. Pretty time consuming work.
Up to
The
167 kilometers long. Like
Yeah,
I'm saying,
so
the length of the study area, that is really significant.
a lot of field work,
Hmm.
going at different times of year, right? Because you don't just go in winter or in summer. You have to go at all different times of year. So there's a lot of effort involved in it, and especially this kind of work, because it's remote. So you're working with helicopters to access these areas as well too. So lots of work required on the vegetation studies, and those studies are well underway on our project, and so we're looking forward to starting to see some of the results in the next year or so, I would say. So, wow, we've run out of time here, Jen. We lot to
It
cover in a
happened so
short period of
fast.
time. Yeah, really, eh? And so that wraps up today's discussion of the vegetation studies, and we hope it was helpful and encourages you to join us again next week. And next week, we're going to talk about the species at risk studies. So don't forget to keep in touch with our project team members via the contact information available on our website, northernroadlink.ca. Miigwech, and make sure to look out for updates on social media and our website. Thanks, Jen.
All right, Bumapee.